Today we're going to be talking about experimental probability, and we need to define some terms for us to do that. We're going to start with experiment. An experiment is an activity involving chance. A trial occurs with each repetition or observation. For instance, if you're rolling a die, each roll of the die is a trial. The outcome is the result that you get, and the sample space is the set of all possible outcomes. So, for example, if you are rolling a die, so the example is a roll of a die, the set of all possible outcomes, you could roll a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, and that's it. So those are all the possible outcomes, and we do put those in braces. An event is an outcome or set of outcomes in an experiment, and the probability is the measure of how likely an event is to occur. Now, how we compute probability, and in this case experimental probability. Experimental probability is the number of times the event occurs divided by the number of trials. So for instance, in this particular case, we say a manufacturer inspects 500 strollers and finds that 498 have no defects. And we want to know, what is the experimental probability that a stroller chosen at random has no defects? So what we're going to do is we're going to take the number of times that event occurs, or in other words, the number of times there are no defects, which is 498, and divide it by the number of total trials. Well, our sample was taken from 500 strollers, so we had 500 possibilities or 500 trials. So we're going to say 498 divided by 500, and if you want to write that as a decimal, it's 0.996, or you can write it as a percent of 99.6%. Okay, so let's move on to our next example. We're still looking at the strollers. It says the manufacturer shipped 3,500 strollers to a distribution center. Predict the number of strollers that are likely to have no defects. Well, there were 3,500 strollers that were shipped, and we learned in our very last problem that the probability of a stroller having a defect is 0.996 or 99.6%. So if we took 99.6% of 3,500, which means we multiply 0.996 times 3,500, we would get 3,486. So 3,486 strollers will have no defects. Or that is the probability is that 3,486 strollers will have no defects. Now, let's look at this next problem. An experiment consists of spinning a spinner. Use the results in the table to find the experimental probability of each event. So you're spinning the spinner, something that looks like this, and you've got 4 different areas on it. I'm not saying I've got this drawn correctly, but something like that. And one section is green, one orange, one purple, and one pink. And you spin the spinner, and 15 times it lands on green, 10 times it lands on orange, 8 times it lands on purple, and 7 times it lands on pink. So we want to find the probability that the spinner lands on orange. Well, what we need to know is how many total trials we had. So if we added 15 plus 10 plus 8 plus 7, we would get 40. So there are actually 40 trials, 40 spins of the spinner. Okay, and out of those 40 trials, 10 times it landed on orange. So our probability is 10 out of 40, or 1/4, that the spinner will land on orange. Now, what's the probability that the spinner does not land on green? Well, how many of these outcomes did not involve landing on green. Well, they landed on orange 10 times, purple 8 times, and pink 7 times. If you add all those together, you get 25 times that you did not land on green out of the 40 possible trials. So 25 over 40, if you reduce that, you get 5/8. So it looks like that the probability is 5/8 that the spinner does not land on green. So this is our introduction to probability today. Thank you very much for joining me.